Hi everybody, my name's Dave. Thanks for joining me, and thank you very much for all your support. I really appreciate it. We've only got 3 subscribers to go to get to 400. Never in my wildest imagination did I ever manage. How we ever got to 400, I don't know. I didn't expect more than 50. Anyway, please like and subscribe. Please consider joining Patreon. If you can't afford that, please buy me a cup of coffee. If you can't do that, then thank you very much for watching anyway, and I appreciate your time. So, I was thinking back a little bit, and I was thinking, I'll tell you the story. I was selling USB lithium battery packs to people at work. I eventually bought one. I don't work there now, but I bought one. And here it is, this particular model. It's a King's, it's a 12 ampere hour lithium battery pack, and I bought it for when my wife broke her ankle and she was non-weight bearing, and she was using her phone for our social media, and it was using the battery up. So I bought her that to keep her battery topped up. I also bought it because I thought it might be useful powering 12-volt electric blankets when I go camping on these colder nights. What always surprised me with these devices, both the 12 and the 24 ampere hour device, was the maximum rate of recharge is only 3 amps, which is very likely the reason it doesn't sell that well. A lot of people buy these things to power fridges for the day. However, did I ever think about whether the cable was capable of charging it when I plugged it in? No, I didn't. I often wondered why do they limit it to 3 amps? But now I'm beginning to see why. One thing about this channel is when I do a bit of research, I find all sorts of things that people don't really care about and don't want to know about, but are quite relevant. And this is one of those things. I'm reading from the screen again, I apologise. You might be thinking, what on earth is this guy harping on about? It's only 1 amp, and that's correct. However, it's a third of a cable's capability, which is the same as running another 50 amps through a 150 amp cable. Only one more third, right? Right? Ah, obviously, it's not as much power as that, but... So what's the official stance on USB cables? Well, in July 2012, the USB Promoters Group announced a USB power delivery specification and extension that makes use of a certified PD-aware USB cables with a standard USB A and B connector to deliver up to 2 amps at 5 volts. In addition, the Type A and B cables, the power delivery option was also to be part of the new USB-C standard with a reversible connector. So theoretically, you would need to get hold of one of these PD cables to safely pass 2.1 amps. Before this, the maximum you could send over your standard USB cable for battery charging was 1.5 amps at 5 volts. And devices not being charged were limited to 100 milliamps or 500 milliamps. So how can you charge this at 3 amps with a USB cable? Strange. Standard USB cables use really small wires. Most use 28 by 28 gauge, and that means that the 28 gauge for data and 28 gauge for power. Because they're all designed to handle only 500 milliamps. 28 gauge is tiny. Better cables use 28 gauge for data and 24 gauge for power, which is still pretty small. You can search for these using USB 2824 on Amazon. With 24 gauge wires and can handle 2 amps, even though that's above the official USB spec of 1.5 amps. Although, come to think of it, I believe a lot of tablets can drop to 2 amps when charging. 24 gauge cable has resistance of 0.0257 ohms per foot, while the resistance of 28 gauge cable is little over 2.5 times that much. So 2 amps through a 24 gauge cable, 6 foot cable, will drop the voltage by 0.3 of a volt. Not good, but okay. The same current through a 28 gauge cable, 6 foot cable, will drop your voltage by 0.77 volts, and this is not so good. And remember, you're only starting off with 5 volts, so you nearly dropped a whole volt there in that whole one thing, just having a 6 foot cable. So there are some problems with USB. Most cable manufacturers do not state what cable they've used in the manufacture of their USB cord. Now, most of the aftermarket ones are going to be 28 by 28. And in fact, this cable here, it's flat. So you can't argue that there's anything bigger than 28 gauge in there. And I think that is the cable that came with... No, I'm telling lies because that's a USB-B. I'll find the cable that came with it. It's here somewhere. Anyway, besides that, that's not the point. It's a King's battery pack, so it's bound to be a 28 by 28 cable. Now, most manufacturers will not give you any specifications on maximum power ratings. And many don't even tell you when there are two types of cable. There are data cables and there are charging cables. Data cables will charge and transfer data, 2824. Charge-only cables will not transfer data. They'll only charge your device. That's why when you buy a new phone and you plug it into an ordinary cable and it won't work, that's why it doesn't work, because it's not a data cable. Okay, so takeaways from this whole thing. Ensure you buy a data and charging cable. Make sure you get one of a good quality one. If you can buy a PD-aware cable, if not, buy a well-known make of cable and hope that they have a 24 gauge wiring in them. I'm just going to plug this back in because it's supposed to be charging. Right, so do not buy long USB cords if you wish to avoid voltage drop. Got a long USB cord there. Although it's only a meter long, so. Cables can significantly impact the charging speed of your USB devices. USB chargers can impact how fast your device battery gets back to 100%, but they're not the only determining factor. The wrong cable can slow down charging speeds as well. USB cables have a data wire and a charging wire and the cable itself. Most USB cables are probably over 99% are 28 cables. Buying aftermarket micro USB cables will pretty much always result in getting a cheap quality 28 by 28 cable, and your device will barely break 500 milliamp when it charges. Maybe even less. This isn't the only issue though. After you use the cable for a while, it pushes slight stresses on the micro USB connector itself and compresses it. This part causes poor connectivity between your device and the wire. This is why it seems like your device port slowly feels like it's getting loose and you think something is wrong. It's most likely the cable being slowly damaged over time. Solution: get a 28-24 gauge cable. 24 gauge is 60% larger and can handle 2 amps. This is what's usually sent when you buy a new tablet or a large phone device. The wire slowly gets damaged over time or may even stop working entirely. You order a cheap off Amazon or eBay and never appears to charge at correct speed anymore. That's why. So, get yourself a decent cable. This is a Blaupunkt cable. Now it's a lot thicker than the cable I was using. Even this good quality cable seems thicker than a lot thinner than this. This seems to be a good quality cable, so we'll use this from now on. Avoid the cheap eBay stuff. Avoid the cable that comes with the device, because that's garbage as well. And it ain't that one. There's a lot of rubbish out there. A lot of companies will put like fibrous texture on the outside of the cable to make it look like it's a quality cable where it isn't. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go off and I'm going to buy some decent cables, and I'm going to see if it makes a difference in charging. But if you've got yourself one of these chargers, or you're charging your phone and you're doing something like this, by the way, I got this at JB Hi-Fi. Look how much thicker than that one is. This is a good quality cable. This will handle the charging. Okay, so anyway, that's it for now. USB cables do have a amperage rating. I'll see you on the next video.